Over the last few weeks, from the Prime Minister to BJP's chief ministers, the ruling party has been scrambling to diffuse the controversy sparked by Home Minister Amit Shah's remarks on Constitution framer Bhimrao Ambedkar in the Parliament. Most of you would remember that last month a clip of Amit Shah's went viral online in which he was saying that it had become a fad to keep harping Ambedkar's name and the opposition would have benefited a lot more if they took God's name as many times.
अभी एक फैशन हो गया है आम्बेडकर 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 इतना नाम अगर भगवान का लेते तो 7 जन्मों तक स्वर्ग मिल जाता.
Coming close on the heels of the Lok Sabha election in which the BJP suffered on account of a decline in the votes from the Dalit community, the party is leaving no stone unturned to show that it is the Congress and not the BJP which has historically been anti-Ambedkar. In response, the RSS mouthpiece organizer has now sought to bring to the fore a well-known but less discussed aspect of the 20th century leader's work: his views on Muslims. In an editorial published last week on the Sambhal Mosque controversy, Praful Ketkar, the editor of the RSS mouthpiece, quoted the following lines from Ambedkar's book Pakistan or the Partition of India. As the invasions were accompanied with destruction of temples and forced conversions, with spoliation of property, with slaughter, enslavement and abasement of men and women and children, what wonder if the memory of these invasions has ever remained green, as a source of pride to the Muslims and a source of shame to the Hindus. In yet another editorial published last week, Ketkar again quoted Ambedkar as saying, "Pandit Nehru is always for the Muslims. I do not want that Muslims should be neglected, but I do want that Muslims should not enjoy at the expense of the other communities who need more protection." This is not the first time that the organizer has highlighted Ambedkar's views on Muslims to underscore the political icon's ideological affinity to the RSS as opposed to the Congress. In 2016, the magazine published an issue on Ambedkar hailing him as the ultimate unifier. A piece written by Ramesh Patange in the issue said that Ambedkar believed that if the lower castes in the country had access to weapons, foreign, that is Muslim invaders, would have never been able to invade the country. To be sure, the projection of Ambedkar as an icon for the BJP and RSS has never gone unchallenged. In response to the 2016 issue of the organizer, for instance, historian Ramachandra Guha wrote in a piece for the Indian Express stating that while he was alive, the RSS reviled both him and his ideas. Yet, as an RSS leader told ThePrint, Ambedkar's views on Muslims were scathing. He saw the community as one that is proud of invaders and for whom their motherland is not here in India. The secular parties cannot afford to show that side of Ambedkar, the leader said. Truth be told, the leader added, Ambedkar's views do not conform to any present-day political ideology in their entirety. As a political storm brews over Ambedkar's legacy once again, we analyze what makes the leader a conundrum for the RSS. While there are obvious divergences between Ambedkar and the RSS on the question of Hinduism, were there any ideological convergences between the two? Were Ambedkar's views on Muslims actually marked by bigotry, or were they marked by pragmatism, or did they simply reflect the discourse of the time he was writing in? And as the RSS leader quoted above said, can Ambedkar be appropriated in his entirety by any ideological camp, let alone the RSS or the BJP today? In the piece published in 2016, Guha offered a case-by-case analysis of how Ambedkar was criticized by the RSS on a range of issues while he was still alive. Be it the constitution which Ambedkar drafted as law minister, or the personal law reforms, especially the Hindu Code Bill, which he piloted, the RSS saw Ambedkar's actual legal contributions with deep suspicion for not being Bharatiya. An article published by the organizer in November 1949, for instance, sarcastically referred to Ambedkar and Nehru as Rishi Ambedkar and Maharishi Nehru, whose reforms would atomize society and infect every family with scandal, suspicion and vice. However, by the 1980s, there were attempts by the RSS to show its closeness to Ambedkar. In 1981, most of you would remember, hundreds of lower caste Hindus in Tirunelveli district of Tamil Nadu converted to Islam, giving the Hindu nationalist organizations a huge impetus to drive home the fear that Hinduism faced an existential threat from Islam. It was at this time that the RSS began to invoke Ambedkar. The RSS leader quoted above said that it was indeed in the 1980s, with large conversions of Dalits to Islam, that the RSS realized that the organization can ill afford to let Ambedkar's legacy be used against Hindutva. Since then, the RSS has sought to highlight its ideological convergences with Ambedkar, he added. Part of this strategy has been to show that Ambedkar was just like Swami Dayanand, Ramakrishna Paramhans, Swami Vivekanand, Sri Aurobindo, or Narayan Guru, who tried to reform and strengthen Hinduism from within. An RSS pracharak from Lucknow told us that while Ambedkar's followers today do pose an ideological threat to the RSS, since they focus too much on the internal divisions among Hindus, Ambedkar was thoroughly anti-Muslim, and that aspect, the pracharak said, needs to be brought out. While it is a matter of academic debate whether Ambedkar was anti-Muslim or not, it remains beyond doubt that he was a strong votary of the partition of India. In his book, Pakistan or the Partition of India, Ambedkar wrote, and I quote, "On the assumption that the two-nation theory has come to stay, will not India as one single unit become an incoherent body without organic unity, incapable of developing into a strong united nation bound by a common faith in a common destiny, and therefore likely to remain a feebler and sickler country, easy to be kept in perpetual subjection either of the British or of any foreign power?" In the book, he also said, whether it is not possible to provide for the growth of two independent and separate nations, a Muslim nation inhabiting Pakistan and a Hindu nation inhabiting Hindustan, than pursue the vain attempt to keep India as one undivided country in the false hope that Hindus and Muslims will someday be one and occupy it as the members of one nation and sons of one motherland. In fact, as pointed out by Ravikant, who is a professor of Hindi at Lucknow University, Ambedkar's view on partition was that it should be total, in that all Muslims should go to Pakistan and all Hindus should come to India. Well, one way to see Ambedkar's staunch support for partition is his pragmatism. In a paper titled The Necessary Conditions for Democracy, B.R. Ambedkar on Nationalism, Minorities in Pakistan, academic Shabnam Tejani argues that homogeneity was a necessary practical condition for Ambedkar for democratic rule in a country like India. Even on the issue of linguistic reorganization of states, Ambedkar's views were rather radical. Within India too, he proposed population transfers in order to engineer ethnic and linguistic homogeneity. Political scientist Hilal Ahmed points out that Ambedkar's work has to be seen in the light of him trying to practically solve the problem of communalism that was being confronted at the time. He was also looking at this question from the point of view of legislative representation and was of the view that communalism must be addressed as a political problem, Ahmed said. However, Tejani argued in the paper that despite the strong currents of uncompromising pragmatism, Ambedkar's views on Muslims revealed a deep element of prejudice embedded within the logic of his argument. In his book published in 1940 and then subsequently in 1946, Ambedkar argues that before the Islamic invasions, not only the pre-partition Punjab, but what is now Afghanistan was part of India, and further the people of the Punjab and Afghanistan were either Vedic or Buddhist by religion. However, the character and culture of the people of these parts, Ambedkar said in his book, were fundamentally altered in the course of what he called the 762 years of incessant Muslim invasions. One of the central aims of these invasions, Ambedkar further said, was striking a blow at the idolatry and polytheism of Hindus and establishing Islam in India. He then goes on to quote from a series of historical texts from the period to show that despite internal differences and contests for power, all Muslim invaders were united by one common objective, and that was to destroy the Hindu faith. These, remember, are the quotes from his book. Even when there was peace, Ambedkar said, Hindus were hit by excessive taxes, subject to humiliating physical beatings, and sadistically denied the good things in life like fine clothing. This wasn't the result of caprice, it was in keeping with the ruling ideas of the leaders of Islam, he said. The result of these incessant Muslim invasions, he said, has been that there is not only no unity between that area, that is the northern parts of pre-partitioned India, and the rest of India, but that there is, as a matter of fact, a real antipathy between the two, Ambedkar wrote. Partition then for him was not just inevitable, but necessary. The problem is that nobody reads Ambedkar in his entirety, a political science professor who requested anonymity told us. He said that when we deify people, we do not want to confront their limitations. If Ambedkar did display bigotry on the issue of Muslims, does it take away from the social revolution he brought about with respect to caste? The professor asked. This is what makes it easy for the Sangh to appropriate him because the others want to pretend like Ambedkar never wrote these things. Hilal Ahmed argues that it would be too simplistic to make any conclusion on Ambedkar's views on Muslims from this writing without seeing the context in which it was written. He said that it was a time when colonial history was the only source of history available in India. This history, remember, simplistically showed that Indian history before the British was clearly divided into two phases: the ancient phase when the Hindus ruled and the medieval phase when the Muslims ruled, with the latter being marked by invasions, loot, temple desecrations, conversions, etc. It also painted Indian Muslims as a homogeneous group. This discourse was so powerful that, as stated by Ahmed, even the Muslims in India were taking refuge in this imagination of Muslim homogeneity at this time. Ambedkar, in that sense, was perhaps not an exception. Moreover, his views on Muslims were not black and white. In the same book, Ambedkar wrote that the reason for the absence of the spirit of change in Muslims in India is that they are placed in a social environment which is predominantly Hindu. This Hindu environment, he argues, is silently but surely encroaching upon Muslims, thereby making them feel that they are being de-Musalmanized. As a protection against this gradual weaning away, the Muslim, Ambedkar said, is led to insist on preserving everything that is Islamic without caring to examine whether it is helpful or harmful to his society. There is yet another fundamental point of divergence between the RSS and Ambedkar. Ambedkar, as we have seen, was a strong, uncompromising votary of partition as the solution to India's communal problem. For the RSS, the partition was India's biggest tragedy, one which it still quietly dreams of rectifying to achieve its dream of Akhand Bharat. Thanks for watching. You can read more on this story on theprint.in. Thank you.